Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the White House Farm murders, which actually resulted in the death of 5 family members. This case was suggested by Ian, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions that you guys have, and if you have any more, let me know. I'd just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect to anyone that I talk about today. I've just gathered this information off the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. So let me take you back to 1985, where we will be in Tolhunt in Essex of England, joining the Bamber family, which consisted of Neville and June, who at the time of this case occurring were both 61. Their adopted daughter, who was named Sheila Caffel, she was 28 years old at the time, and also their adoptive son, Jeremy Bamber, who was 24. Sheila also had two twin boys that were at the age of 6 at the time, called Nicholas and Daniel. Ralph Neville Bamber was born on the 8th of June in 1924, and I will refer to him as Neville because that is how he was known. Nobody really knew him as Ralph, they all called him Neville. He used to be an RAF pilot, but later on in life would take up farming. June was born on the 3rd of June in 1924, and the pair met each other, they started dating, the relationship went really well, and in 1949 they got married. They were both very religious, especially June. June was super religious. Neville was described as being really tall. He was 6'4", well-built man, and he had really good physical health. He was kind of described as a manly man, but he was really easygoing. He was a really lovely natured man who was very kind, down to earth, and just a genuinely lovely guy. He was also really well respected within his community. June was described kind of the polar opposite in a sense. She was a very quiet person and she was extremely shy, but the couple just fit together perfectly and they were thought to be a perfect match for each other. The couple unfortunately found out very quickly that they weren't able to have children, and that is why they did decide to adopt. I've already introduced them, Sheila and Jeremy, but they were actually babies when they adopted them, so they had them from being a very young age. It wasn't like an older child adoption. Sheila Jean Caffel was born on the 18th of July in 1957 to the 18-year-old daughter of a senior chaplain. And he pretty much insisted that his daughter put up Sheila for adoption. She was adopted by the Bamber family in 1957 after being selected off a list by the chaplain of prospective adopters. Jeremy Neville Bamber was born on the 13th of January in 1961. His mother was a student midwife who'd actually had an affair with a married man, an army sergeant, and he was given up at the age of just 6 weeks old. When he reached 6 months old, Neville and June went on to adopt him. The couple were just really excited to have these children, and they were so happy to be expanding their family. They actually lived in quite a small house at the time, and so they decided that they were going to move to a bigger house because obviously their family had just expanded by 2, and so they wanted a bigger space to live in. So what they did is June's father had a farmhouse and they decided that they were going to move in there. It was the Georgian White House Farm on Pages Lane. It sat on 300 acres of farmland, and it was beautiful, and it was so much space for the kids to run around in and grow up on, and it was just such a lovely, huge house. Raising the children, they wanted the very best for them, and they were quite a well-off family. They owned a business called OC Road Campsites, so they had a decent amount of money. So Sheila was sent off to various different private schools, basically just to make sure that she could get the best education that was available. After this, she was even sent to secretarial school so that she could be taught to become a secretary. Jeremy also went to private schools, but he suffered from severe behavioural issues. He was always really naughty, he always got in trouble, and he wasn't very well liked by his classmates or anything like that, and he never really had any friends because of it. He was known as this really big prankster, and even his family didn't like that aspect about him. So June was really frightened of rats, and Jeremy would find baby rats, put them in his pocket, and then force June to put a hand in his pocket. She'd feel these rats and he would grab it so that she couldn't pull it out, so that she had to have it in there with something that she was scared of. So he was pulling a prank on her, but it was a prank that I guess was in bad taste for her because she was frightened of them. At the age of 9, because of his behaviour, they decided that they were going to send him to boarding school. They felt like that would really benefit him, even though he absolutely despised it. He was really unhappy there. He felt like he was bullied by the students, bullied by the teachers. He told a group of people that he thought were his friends that he'd been adopted, and they started calling him the bastard, as in he was born out of wedlock or whatever. Jeremy felt very unwanted. He was very unwanted by his biological parents because they gave him up for adoption. And yes, the Bamber family adopted him and took him in and raised him as their son, which he was. But now they were sending him off to boarding school, and it felt like they didn't want him either, and that is just how he felt at the time. There was also reports of him actually suffering sexual abuse there. Now, how true that is, we don't know, but a lot of bad stuff did happen in boarding schools back then, so it could very well be true. After Jeremy left there, he attended sixth form college, and he got his O-levels in 1978. His father went on to pay for him to visit Australia, where he took a scuba diving course, and then he went on to travel to New Zealand. Jeremy returned to England in 1982, and his father had basically set up his life for him. So his father had bought this cottage, which was 3.5 miles away from the main farmhouse, a literal 5-minute drive down the road for Jeremy to live in. So he had bought him this house, and under the sort of idea that he would either work for the company or work for the farm. And he would earn a wage too, so he was going to get £170 for working on the farm. And not only that, they were going to give him an 8% stake in the company too. He had been really, really well set up for his life, for his adult life. And he had a job, he had an income, he had a house that he was given. Some could say that he was potentially spoiled a little bit. So from the outside, people kind of looking in, who don't really know the ins and outs of their family life like they wouldn't do, it looked like a perfect family. They were happily married, Neville and June. They had 2 children that they adored, that got pretty much a lot of things that they wanted. They had money, so they could splurge it and enjoy themselves and spend it on what they wanted. And it kind of looked like a perfect family. But on the inside, what you couldn't see was that June was really, really suffering with her mental health and depression. During her life in the 1950s and even 1958, June was actually admitted to a psychiatric hospital. And the 1958 instance was just after they had adopted Sheila. While she was there, she was treated with electroshock therapy at least 6 times. And her problems of depression really circled around her kids. So it's really sad actually, because all they wanted was these children. And then June becomes depressed as a result of them. And it's awful. I know it's not their fault and it's also not hers, it's a medical condition, but I just found it quite sad. So she was very religious, as I've said, and she kind of put her religion on her children like you would. That's what she believed in, that's what she thought they should believe in. And she didn't actually think that they were good Christians. She really saw the world as good and bad, and she felt like they were bad. Sheila at the time was doing modelling, which June absolutely hated. She thought really, really low of that, and she despised it. Jeremy was thought to be a bit of a loser, at least in his mother's eyes. He was on the farm, he was all day at home, and she really, really didn't like what he was actually farming, which was cannabis. As I said, June was very strict with them. She kind of tried to force her beliefs onto them, and it just sort of backfired, and it strained their relationship because of that. There was one major thing that June really did despise, and that was that at the age of 17, Sheila got pregnant, and it was out of wedlock. The man she got pregnant with was called Colin Caffell. The Bambers arranged an abortion because June felt like it wouldn't be good on their reputations to have Sheila at the age of 17 pregnant, and so she pushed for an abortion. Even though she was super religious and they don't believe in abortions, at least in the public eye, she pretended that she didn't believe in them, but then she's forcing Sheila to have one behind closed doors. They weren't allowed to tell anyone about it because that would also ruin her reputation. The relationship that they had together was already really strained, and now it just kind of went spiraling downhill after that, and Sheila felt like she couldn't trust her mother anymore. That summer, June found Sheila and Colin sunbathing naked out on the land, and that was around the time she began calling her daughter the Devil's Child. In May of 1977, Sheila and Colin went and got married. She was pregnant again, but ended up suffering from a miscarriage on her 6th month of pregnancy. The Bambers bought the couple a flat in Hampstead to help Sheila try and recover from the ordeal after such a tragic loss. Sheila also went on to suffer another miscarriage after that, but then on the 22nd of June in 1979, she was in hospital for 4 months on bed rest when she gave birth to her twin boys, Nicholas and Daniel. Just before that, Colin had apparently began having an affair, and Sheila found out and obviously wasn't happy, as you wouldn't be. Just 5 months after their sons were born, the pair ended up splitting up. Sheila was devastated. It's understandable, you know, she married this man, she loved this man. He was the father to 2 of her children, and they'd gone through a lot together, but he was cheating on her, so she just got more and more upset, and on one occasion it spiraled that much that she needed hospital attention. Colin had left a 21st birthday party to go and be with another woman, and she went on to break a window with her fist, and she needed to go to hospital for that. The couple did end up getting a divorce in May of 1982. Sheila's mental health declined rapidly. She was becoming more and more depressed. She had episodes of banging her head on the walls, and she actually ended up going to see the same psychiatrist that her mother had, and she saw him in 1983. This was Dr. Hugh Ferguson. He went on to admit her to a psychiatric hospital like her mother before her, and it was there he diagnosed her with schizoaffective disorder. She was suffering similar things to her mother. She began calling her children the devil's children. She often spoke to the doctor about how she wanted to end her life and her children's lives because she believed that they were possessed. She also said that she felt like she could tell her children to go and kill other children. So after saying all of that, guess what Dr. Ferguson did? Well, he cleared her and he let her out, which was totally wise. After Sheila was discharged in 1983, he carried on seeing her as like an outpatient basis, and that is when he concluded that his first diagnosis had been incorrect. He now believed that she was actually suffering from schizophrenia, and he was treating her with trifluperazine, and I'm sorry if I've said that wrong, I probably have. Due to her mental health, it was decided that they were going to take her kids away from her, temporarily at least, and they went to stay with their dad. You would have thought that really that should have been done sooner. She's going on about how she wants to kill her kids and herself, and how she can get her children to kill other children, but I guess they did it eventually, so better late than never. On the 4th of August in 1985, Sheila goes and collects her boys, planning a trip to go and see Grandma and Granddad. The kids were really excited to see everyone, and so was Sheila. I know I've spoken a lot about the tension between June and Sheila, but they really were trying to work on the relationship and trying to mend it and get closer together again. The housekeeper went on to later state that Sheila came with her boys. They were happy, they were delighted, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They were really glad to be there, basically. Nothing seemed like it was wrong. 2 days later, on the 6th of August, they all go into the family house, they all sit down, and they all have a family meal, and it is really lovely. According to Jeremy, the family discussed placing the boys in daytime foster care over dinner, and Sheila didn't really respond to that. Now, I have read that the boys were in daytime foster care before, and that Sheila probably wouldn't have had an objection to that because that was most of the time when she needed help with them. So I've also read that Sheila was really not happy about that comment, so take that as you want. Once the meal was over, Jeremy goes back to his cottage. It's about 9:30 p.m. at this point. Around that same time, the farm secretary rings Neville and they chat for a little bit. She said that when she spoke to Neville, he seemed really off, and as if she just rang and kind of interrupted an argument that they were having. Now, Neville was always a lovely guy and he was always really polite, and he was very short with her, and then he hung up the phone on her, which wasn't like him at all. She thought it was really weird. As I said, he was normally a nice guy and he would never ever dream of doing that usually, so she thought that something was up and that possibly they'd all been arguing or something like that. Then around 30 minutes later, June's sister, Pamela Balfour, rings. She wants to speak to June. They have a chat. At some point, Sheila gets on the phone, and Pamela would later state that she did feel like Sheila was acting odd. So that's 2 family members now, seemingly acting not their normal selves, and it was just a bit strange. On the 7th of August at around 3:30 a.m, Jeremy gets a call from his father. He tells him that his sister has gone berserk with a gun, and then mid-call, the line just goes dead. Jeremy decided to call the police, obviously, but he didn't actually call the emergency line, he called the local police.
My name's Jeremy Bamber from Goldhanger. You've got to help me. My father's phoned from White House Farm and he sounded really frightened. He says, my sister's gone crazy and she's got a gun. Well, then the phone went dead. It sounded Well, like someone had cut the line.
The police told him to go to the farm and they would meet him there. Now, as I said, he lived a 5-minute drive down the road. So you would expect that he would get there pretty damn quick, especially if his family's lives were in danger. As the police are approaching, they end up stuck behind Jeremy, who is literally crawling across the road. He is going so slow, and they end up beating him there because they overtake him. Now, as I said, you wouldn't have thought it would have taken him long to get there because that's his family, and you would have been frightened. You would have wanted to get there as soon as possible. Maybe he could have shouted from outside and talked his sister down if she was going mad with a gun. But there just seemed to be no real rush in him, at least. On the other hand as well, I have thought about it. Maybe he was frightened. If his sister was swinging a gun around, maybe he was terrified to even go around there because he was scared for his own life. It was around 5 a.m. when they all arrived, and the police, they don't go straight in there. They don't barge down the door and wade in there. They don't do anything like that for 2 hours. So they stand outside for 2 whole hours. And the thing that's weird with that, okay, it is like a hostage negotiation going on. You're not just going to barge in there. You're going to try and speak to them. You're going to, wait it out to go in at the safest possible moment. But they stood out there with a megaphone. They're shouting in. They get zero response. The only thing that they hear is a dog barking. So they still stand there for 2 hours without hearing anything. There's nobody talking back to them. There's no gunshots. There's no sound of struggles. There's no anything apart from that dog barking. But they still sit there for 2 hours. I don't understand why they did that. The reason as to why nobody responded and all they could hear was the barking dog was that everybody was already dead. As they're waiting there, Jeremy gives an account of the previous night, saying that the family dinner they had was totally fine. And as he's chatting, he talks about the call that he had received from his dad. Then he goes on about how the topic changed and it was brought up about the kids going into foster care, daytime foster care, and that his sister didn't like it. He spoke about her mental health issues, but he said that she was fine when he left. Just as the police are finally about to enter the house, he decides, literally as they're going in, to tell them, oh, by the way, I left a loaded gun on the side with ammunition, just to let you know. Police had already begun to form an opinion of what had happened over what they'd been told. Jeremy had left a loaded gun inside, Sheila suffered really badly with her mental health, and they'd had an argument over dinner. And then Jeremy gets a call from his dad saying that his sister's wielding a gun. It seems pretty obvious and clear-cut. At 7:54 a.m, the police finally enter the house. They break in through a back door using a sledgehammer. Again, I don't understand why it took them so long. They didn't hear anything from the house, but at least they were finally in there. This is when they find the bodies of Neville, June, Sheila, and her twin boys, Nicholas and Daniel. 25 shots had been fired in total, and most of them were done at close range. June, Sheila and her sons were all upstairs, whereas Neville was found downstairs. Neville was found in the kitchen. He was wearing pyjamas, lying over an upturned chair, and the scene looked like a struggle had taken place. He had been shot 8 times, 6 of which were into his sort of face and neck area, and they were done at close range. The remaining 2 shots were to his body, and they had been done from at least 2 feet away. Based on where the empty cartridges were found, 3 in the kitchen and 1 on the stairs, the police concluded that he had actually been shot 4 times whilst he was upstairs, originally where he was, but he had somehow managed to struggle to get downstairs, where him and whoever his attacker was struggled and just basically fought each other. He really tried to defend himself. He was then hit several times with the rifle and then shot again, this time fatally, which ended his life. There were 2 wounds to his top right side and 2 to the top of his head. The left side of his lip was split, his jaw was fractured, and his teeth, neck and larynx were all damaged. He also had black eyes and a broken nose, with bruises and cuts just all over his body. So as you can see, the attack on him was brutal and it seemed quite personal. Like a really, really angry attack for somebody to get that up close and to shoot somebody. That's normally what it is. June had been shot 7 times. Her body and her nightdress was absolutely covered in blood, and she was found lying on the floor, kind of near the door to the master bedroom. She'd been shot once between her eyes, which was fired from just under a foot away. That and another shot that was done to the side of her head would have ended her life very quickly. The boys were found in their room, having been shot whilst they were asleep in bed. Daniel had been shot 5 times and Nicholas had been shot 3 times. Sheila was found on the master bedroom floor along with June. She was in a nightdress, her feet were bare, and she had been shot 3 times. She had been shot in the face and the gun was laid on top of her, pointing in that direction. There were no marks on her body suggesting that there had been a struggle. The firearms officer that had seen her said that her feet and hands were clean. Her fingernails appeared to be manicured, none of them were broken, and her fingertips were free of blood, dirt and powder that would have been on them from obviously shooting a gun. There was no trace of lead dust whatsoever on her. The rifle magazine would have been had to have been loaded at least 2 times during the killings, and that would normally leave like a lubricant and some material from the bullets, but by all appearances her hands didn't have anything like that on them. As you can imagine, there was so much blood everywhere. They also found that the phone was off the hook. So after going inside to find that horrific scene of a bloodbath, they go outside to break the news to Jeremy. And he was absolutely horrified. He had this huge physical reaction to the news where he was screaming, he ended up throwing up, he started punching things, he was crying, he was just utterly hysterical. And he just simply broke down. Police really did think that they knew what had happened. As I said, Jeremy was insistent on telling them about Sheila's mental health issues. You know, she snapped, she killed her entire family. Jeremy survived because he wasn't in the house. And then she killed herself. At least that was their theory at the time anyway. Straight away the media came in and they started spreading that theory as fact, which is just so wrong because it wasn't fact. They didn't know, it was just speculation at that point. The strange thing that I find though is that Sheila was shot 3 times. Now, of course it's possible, but generally if you've just killed your entire family and now you plan on ending your own life, you only have to shoot yourself once. I also found it really odd that there were no other marks on her body. There had been a violent struggle with her father, so why didn't she have any marks on her body to show that? The handling of this case was shameful, and they didn't even treat it as a crime scene at all. Literally to the point that they went in, they burnt all the carpet and the bedding just to get the bloodstains out, so they're out there burning evidence, setting it all on fire. And it was because they wanted to spare Jeremy's feelings, apparently, which is just insane. All of that is evidence, and they just burnt it away. Not only that, so get this, one of the detectives goes in and he picks up the murder weapon with his bare hands, which is just, again, insane. Whilst inside, they found something interesting. Carved into one of the cupboards in the kids' room were the words, "I hate it here." Now, of course, that we don't know when that was done. I believe it used to be Sheila's room, so possibly Sheila did it when she was young. We just don't know when that was actually done, whether it was recent or not. 3 days after the entire Bamba family pretty much has been murdered, Jeremy gets the keys for White House Farm. Since he's the sole survivor, he gets the entire inheritance. He had everything. He had the freedom to do whatever he wanted to do without his parents over him, without them telling him what to do. And now he had all the money, all of everything. Days later at the funeral, Jeremy is very dramatic. He's hysterical. He's sobbing extremely loudly, screaming out. And family members did think it was really, really strange how he was acting. And I get it. You know, losing your entire family would be devastating, and I wouldn't even like to think about that, but I don't know, it was an extreme reaction, and even his family members, who had also lost part of their family, thought it was weird, so maybe it was very, very over the top. A few family members also mentioned that as the funeral was coming to an end and people began to leave, Jeremy, when he thought that nobody was looking, had this huge smile across his face. The media went to the funeral, and Jeremy, when he was in front of them, would just put on a show for them. He would literally fall to the ground feeling super emotional, but when he wasn't being filmed, he was just back to normal. So it was just super strange. And his family members thought the same too. At the wake, he went on to say some strange things, and he pretty much went from an emotional wreck that could barely stand up, that just couldn't deal with the hand that they had been dealt, and now suddenly he's normal, he's fine, he's making comments like, "I'm the boss now," and how he was gonna nail his girlfriend when he got home. So that's a very big change of pace from being a total wreck on the floor to, yeah, I'm gonna nail my girlfriend when I get home. Police went on to fingerprint the rifle, and they found Sheila's fingerprints on it, and they found Jeremy's fingerprints on it. They had already begun to have suspicions about Jeremy at this point, and that just amplified them. But he just said that it was his gun, and he had loaded it up because he planned on going out and shooting rabbits, which he never actually did. That is why he had his fingerprints were on it. Not long after he got the house keys, a cousin went and stayed at the house. That was on the 10th of August. David Balfour was his name, and he went on to find a silencer that had been hidden, seemingly, in a cupboard in the family office. When the rifle was found, it didn't have a silencer on it, and so now they had the question as to whether this silencer was on the gun when the shots were fired, because why was it now hidden, seemingly hidden in this cupboard? They found that it actually had some red paint chips, I guess, and some blood on the end of the nozzle. They sent it off and they determined that the blood wasn't Jeremy's, but they couldn't determine specifically whose it was. I believe it could have either been Sheila's, Neville's, or June's. Now this makes it seem like the silencer must have been on the gun, because how else would the blood have gotten on it of one of them, unless it was on the gun when the gun was fired? They also found the specks of paint were, I believe, from the kitchen. Now this makes it seem like the silencer was in fact on the gun, and if it was on the gun, there was no possible way that Sheila could have shot herself with that gun with the silencer on. The thing is that Sheila's arms physically wouldn't have been able to hold the entirety of the gun along with the silencer, which makes it longer, to be able to put it up and shoot herself. It wasn't possible because her arms weren't long enough, and so that threw a massive spanner in the works. Also, at the time, Jeremy had a girlfriend called Julie Mugford. They'd been in a relationship about 2 years at this point, and on the day of the murders, he called her and told her something was wrong, but wouldn't tell her what. He was acting sketchy, and then he hung up on her. A few hours later, she found out about the murders. Around a month after the killings, their relationship really started to deteriorate because Julie was suspicious of him. She was questioning him. She kept asking him questions all the time, poking holes in everything that he said. And they both would row. And at one point, it got that bad that she said she would smother him with a pillow because she was just that angry at him. In September, Julie discovered that he had been cheating on her, and that was a final straw. She was so angry that she actually beat him. She then went to the police and she told them that she was worried that he was the one that had killed the Bamber family. She said that he was a shady guy and it was something that he would do. She went on to tell them about an incident where he had actually staged a robbery on his own family's campsite. He stole the money and then he staged it as a robbery. When they questioned him about that, he just said that he was trying to show his family that they needed a better security system. She told them how he said he was always sick of his family and sick of them controlling him and telling him what to do, and that they wanted to run his life. How he thought Sheila was a bad mom and that her kids would end up disturbed. Not only that, she felt like he wanted their money. She said that a will had recently been made, and in it detailed that Jeremy and Sheila would get a split down the middle of all of everything. So they would get an equal portion to the family inheritance, and he didn't like that at all because he wanted it all for himself. Julie said he told her many times about how he had thought about killing his family, including drugging them with sleeping pills, burning down their house, and get this, shooting them all to death. She said he thought it would be easy to push blame on Sheila because of her mental health issues, and that it would just be blamed on that, leaving him the poor victim, the sole survivor of his family's brutal murders. Julie said that he phoned her at 9:50 p.m. on the 6th of August to say that he'd been thinking about the crime all day, was really pissed off, and that it was tonight or never. A few hours later, at around 3 to 3:30, on the 7th of August, he rang her again and said everything is going well, something is wrong at the farm, I haven't had any sleep all night, bye honey, and I love you lots. He then went on to call her in the morning, stating that Sheila had gone mad, and that is when she went down to the farm to find out what was going on, to support him. And when she got there, he pulled her to one side and whispered, I should have been an actor. She said she questioned him about it that night, and said that he got super weird and super defensive about it, and ended up saying that he had hired the plumber to do it and that the plumber killed his family. Now, after hearing all of this, along with their own suspicions, as I said, they were already building suspicions against him, they went out and they arrested Jeremy and the plumber. The plumber had an alibi, but Jeremy didn't, and so he was put in jail. Because he had so much money, he just bailed himself out and he got the heck out of America. He went straight to Amsterdam, where he tried to sell off his family belongings. He went to try and sell things like their cars, and he even went as far as to try and sell nude pictures of his own sister to a tabloid, which is just gross. And really disrespectful, because at this point she was no longer alive. It's just wrong. And it's really disrespectful either way. whether she was alive or not. On the 29th of December, Jeremy returns back and he is arrested straight away. His trial started on the 3rd of October in 1986, and the prosecution put forward that he was responsible for the entire crime, that he had tried to blame his sister, how Neville had all these defense marks and it looked like a brutal struggle, and how Sheila was this small, petite woman who would never have been able to overpower him. He was a very tall, very strong and healthy man. It was believed that he would have been easily able to overpower her and must have fought someone that more kind of matched his size and his, I guess, stature. There was also a lot around the phone call that Jeremy received from his father just before the murders, and they said that he never actually got that call. That Neville would have been too badly injured at that point, and there wasn't even any blood on the phone, and the foot, which was found off the hook, obviously. Now, if Neville was upstairs and he had been shot 4 times, stumbled downstairs and got on the phone, there probably would have been blood on it. There is the other instance where, I guess, if he's seen Sheila with the gun, he could have rushed downstairs, called Jeremy, and then gone upstairs, and then she shot him. They said that he entered the house through a downstairs window, which he had always, he'd done a lot. He could get in and out of the house without being detected. He had taken the rifle with a silencer attached, and that he had gone upstairs. He shot June while she was in the bed. She managed a few steps before she collapsed, and then she was dying. He shot Neville in the bedroom too, but Neville was able to get downstairs, where he followed, and there was this massive struggle. They fought in the kitchen before he was shot again, and then he lost the battle. He had shot Sheila in the main bedroom next to her mother, and had shot the children in their beds whilst they slept. He then arranged the scene to make it appear like Sheila was the killer. The defense, on the other hand, came back that Sheila had committed the murder-suicide because of her mental health, and they put forward all of her history, all of her vast history of mental health, where she wanted to kill herself, wanted to kill her kids, wanted to get her kids to kill other kids, which obviously didn't look good for Sheila. At the same time, maybe Jeremy knew that, and that would have made it all easier for him to get away with it and blame it on her. They also brought up the fact that everyone else had dried blood on them, but Sheila's wasn't. It was more recent, so it was as if she had killed everyone else, probably waited around a while. Maybe the police turned up, maybe she realised there was no getting out of it for her, and so then she shot herself. But the thing with that, I don't understand, is that the police didn't hear anything. They were stood outside and they didn't hear anything, so surely they would have heard the shot if that was the case. This made the case against Sheila weaker and against Jeremy stronger. Not only that, there's the silencer again. There was no possible way that Sheila could have put that silencer on and killed everyone and then herself. So maybe she did it for everyone. Maybe she realised that actually she couldn't reach, and so she took that silencer off. But then you would have laid it next to you. It would have been found there. Why would she have gone and hidden it in a cupboard? It didn't matter to her whether the silencer was found. So she would have unscrewed it, put it next to her, and then shot herself. But it was found seemingly hidden away in a cupboard. The defense argued some more that Sheila was the killer, that she knew how to handle guns, having been raised on the farm and attending shoots when she was a lot younger. She had a very serious mental illness. The loaded rifle was there on the counter, and after the family argument, she just shot everyone because she was angry and mentally unstable. So those were the arguments, and the jury went off to discuss everything. The jury consisted of 7 men and 5 women, and they deliberated for 9 hours before they returned with a guilty verdict by majority of 10-2 for Jeremy committing these crimes. He was given 5 life sentences with no chance of parole. Now, this case is still heavily debated today. Some people do think that Jeremy did commit this crime and that he is serving the time for killing his entire family. Others think, on the other hand, that Julie was lying because she was really mad at Jeremy and that actually he is innocent. And without her, he probably wouldn't have been convicted because she was the one that went to the police and told them all this stuff. So maybe he wouldn't have actually gotten convicted if it wasn't for Julie. They believe that it is a huge miscarriage of justice and that they have an innocent man in jail serving time for a crime that he didn't commit. There are also these campaigns online for his release. He had an appeal against his convictions dismissed by the Court of Appeal in 2002. Jeremy has spent his time in jail appealing his conviction and maintains his innocence. He is now 60 years old, having spent 35 years in jail. This year, in 2021, Jeremy claimed that he has multiple grounds for an appeal, including evidence that the jury did not have the full facts on and were misled. The evidence is said to include records that show that a call was made from Neville to Jeremy that night, and that was 10 minutes before Jeremy called the police. The Criminal Cases Review Commission will now review and decide as to whether the case should be referred to the Court of Appeal for a second time. So we'll have to wait and see as to whether Jeremy does get his appeal. But for now, I'd like to know what you guys think. Do you think it was Sheila, or do you think that they have the right man and it was in fact Jeremy? But yeah, that's the end of the case. Give me a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of the White House Farm murders. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.